Oh, Hallie Rally! Hello guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel and welcome to today's video. I hope you're all doing really well. Today we're going to be talking all things transitioning from one kid to two kids because, wow, that was a ride. So for anyone that's new here, my name is Shan and I'm a mum of two and I had my first baby in 2020. The year that we all want to forget from our memories, but it was also the happiest year of my life despite everything. My son George was born in September 2020 and he is now 3.5, and then I also had my daughter in July 2023. So there's about a 3-year age gap, almost a 3-year age gap between my kids, and transitioning between being a mum of one to a mum of two has been the biggest challenge that I've ever had to face in my entire life. And by no means do I want to scare anyone that's about to become a mum of two or a dad of two. It might not work this way for you. Every family is so incredibly different. Everyone's needs are so individual. Every kid is so individual, and circumstances, etc. And I know I don't need to tell you this, but honestly, just because this was my reality doesn't mean it was going to be yours. But I have had a lot of requests asking for this video about practical tips as to how to transition from one to two and what things work, what things didn't work. Now I definitely want to caveat this with not all kids are going to react the same by having a little sibling introduced. Some might be jealous, some might be just completely ambivalent and not really care and not paying any attention whatsoever, and others might get really jealous. And if I'm totally honest, we probably experienced all three of those emotions on a daily basis. So it's a bit of a roller coaster, and some of these little tips and these habits that I put in place, I definitely didn't do those every day, but I found that when I had the mental capacity to, and I was quite thoughtful about how I was acting, it definitely improved the day. And then the following day, if I didn't implement something, then, because I'm tired or frankly I forgot or it didn't come completely naturally to me, that's when potentially the day didn't go as smoothly. So it's just nice to have these things in your back pocket for when things aren't going very well, and you can then maybe bring things back on track, like hopefully. That's the aim anyway, hey? So, with all that said, let's get into some practical tips as to how to transition from one to two kids. So the first tip that I received when I was pregnant with my daughter was to start preparing my toddler for what was to come and for what life might look like when we have another baby in the house and for when he becomes a big brother. The ways we would do that is like maybe by having a little cuddle on the sofa, getting my bump out and telling him about the fact that there's a baby in there, and sort of getting him used to the idea that then is going to be a real baby that we're going to have to look after and carry, and babies cry a little bit and they need their nappy changed and they need milk and all those kinds of things. And I would also talk to George about him being an older brother and that he's a big boy and a role model, and they're going to really look up to him and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know how much effect it had, but it was a really nice activity at least to do in the run up to actually having a baby. And another thing that we did sort of in the very early moments of them meeting, when we first came back from hospital, was actually bring a present back with us for George when we came back from hospital from the baby. So from Hallie got George a present, and it was like a nice little moment that he thought that he was getting a present from the baby, which was quite nice. We got him this little like electric boat that he played with in the bath that night, and he knew that it came from his little sister. And it was like obviously we'd been away and then we're coming back with a baby into his house, so we thought it'd be nice to bring him a present. I don't think it's essential or anything like that, but I thought it was a nice little moment. It could be as little as a lollipop or a chocolate bar or whatever, something like that, but we, like I said, got him a little boat, and I thought it was a nice little activity for him to do in the bath. And I also thought it'd get him wanting to have baths, because he was going through a stage of not wanting to have baths at that point, and it worked. Then once you're properly in the throes of it, and the practical tips need to come out thick and fast to help you ride this wave, because it will be a wave. It's a roller coaster of emotions having a newborn and a toddler. Everyone's emotions are crazy, like yours and your toddler's, and then also the needs of your baby are quite high at that time. So it's it's high intensity, guys, it really is. But one thing that I found completely revolutionary for my toddler specifically was having a little bit of one-on-one time with him, like carving out specific one-on-one time uninterrupted, no baby, no TV, no screens at all, no housework, nothing, and actually just sitting down for 15 minutes a day, like specifically just to play with my toddler, just to play with whatever he wanted to do, talk to him, ask questions, him ask me questions, and really have that dedicated one-on-one time. And when I got told this, I was like, well, I do that anyway, like I'll still do that. But I actually then took a step back and realised that maybe I don't do that. Maybe the TV's on in the background, maybe I check my phone, or maybe I am like, you know, always cooking dinner or sterilising bottles or whatever it might have been, like doing the washing and sorting the house generally, picking up all the toys constantly. Like maybe I'm not actually just sitting, dedicating some time to play and talk and interact just with him. It really made me think about it, and I try and do this now like every single day. I try and have that time with George, and I also have that time with Hallie, but I think with George it was really important, especially in the early days, to know, for him to know that he's got that special time with me coming up. And when I was consistent with it and I did it every day, he was much more patient in the times where he did have to wait a little while to get my attention, because he knew that he was going to get that dedicated time. And it can be hard sometimes to just like completely drop everything, but if the baby is napping, which fingers crossed they nap, because wow, if they don't, mate, that's really hard. We definitely went through stages where my baby did not nap and it made it very, very difficult. But if your baby is napping, you can just wait to tidy up, to sterilise the bottles, to prep for dinner. You can wait for 15 minutes. Although it might seem like counterintuitive, I found that if I did spend some uninterrupted, dedicated time with him, that then he would let me go off and do something else afterwards, and because we'd had that special bonding time. Plus, I think it just means the world to them to have your undivided attention, especially when they have a new sibling arrive and everything's up in the air and they're not the entire centre of the universe anymore. Actually, there's two of them and they are competing. So for him to have that dedicated time, I knew that it meant a lot to him and it meant a lot to me as well. The next really key one for me was to focus on what my toddler could do rather than what he couldn't do with the baby. And I think everyone's going to experience this if they have a toddler and a newborn in the house. So in my experience, my toddler is very boisterous, he's very heavy-handed. He didn't know how to be with a baby, and he also didn't necessarily know how to show his love. He was showing it in a way that was quite rough and tumble and quite, you know, overbearing and all that kind of stuff, and it was very difficult for me to try and not be like, no, 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 don't do that. That is what I wanted to say, and I did say that a lot. When I tried to flip it from, no, 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 don't do that, don't jump on your sister, don't roll on her, don't pick her up by her neck, all of those things happened. I tried to flip it to what he could do instead. So instead of him, you know, trying to pick her up or trying to sit on her or trying to like be really close to her face and like, you know, lick her or whatever it would have been, I would say, why don't we lay down next to the baby? Why don't we hold baby's hand? Why don't we kiss baby on the cheek or on the forehead? Or we can stroke her arms, or we can maybe touch her legs, and those kind of things. And I would just focus on what he was allowed to do rather than what he wasn't allowed to do, because the list is obviously a lot longer for the things that he isn't allowed to do. And I kind of just had to try and help him to like just learn how to be a baby and what was safe and what wasn't safe. But instead of focusing on the negative, I would always focus on the positive and what he could do. That then kind of bleeds into the next practical tip, which was to get my toddler involved in the daily activities of having a newborn. There are obviously loads of tasks that need doing, and although they can't really help with a lot of them, it's nice to help them feel involved. So for example, I would ask George to go and get me a dummy, or get Hallie a muslin, or help me sterilise bottles, or make a bottle, or pour my express milk into bottles, whatever it would have been. I did find when I was breastfeeding it was a little bit more difficult to get him involved in the feeding aspects, but like I say, getting dummies or muslins or nappies, those kind of things really did help. And I also still use this now. Like for example, getting out of the house, I asked George to go and get me something for Hallie, like maybe a toy or something for the car. I always try and get him involved in the activities so that he doesn't feel like a little bit pushed out, because there's obviously a lot going on, especially in those early days. So many tasks need doing, so if he's involved in them, then he wasn't then sort of trying to fight for my attention against those tasks. So he was like helping me. He'd get his learning tower out when we would like sterilise the bottles together. Like we used the Milton sterilising tablets and the cold water steriliser. So we would put all the bottles, the clean bottles in, he would put them in, I'd ask him to put the tablet in for me, and then we'd go to the tap, he'd turn the tap on for me, and we'd watch it like fizz up, and that would all work, and he'd close the lid for me. And he got really proud of himself when he was able to do all of those tasks. He just wants to be an adult most of the time anyway, so that kind of worked hand in hand, and it was a way of getting those tasks done with him feeling seen and appreciated and wanted, and you know, doing it with the least amount of friction possible anyway. The next one for me was probably the most revolutionary one when I discovered it, when Hallie was probably about 6 weeks old, I think. Oh gosh, I've probably blocked it from my memory, but that was to download the Huckleberry app. This is a baby sleep tracker and feed tracker. You can track loads of different things. You can track nappy changes and pumping and breastfeeding, and if you give them medicine, their growth chart, their temperature, their activities. You can track pretty much anything on this app, but what I use it for specifically is for sleep and for feeds. The main reason I found this so revolutionary is because we were really struggling with Hallie's sleep at one point. She took a long time to get to sleep. Like we would have to rock her or feed her to sleep, and then it would also only last for like half an hour when she would have her nap. So that time period was very much taken up, and it was very difficult to get her to sleep again when there were loud noises like a toddler running around. It was and you know, fighting for your attention. It was very difficult. So when it came to the Huckleberry app, to track her sleep was one of the main things I think that helped her get into a slight bit of a routine, because we still had to rock her to sleep and all that kind of stuff, but at least then with the tracker we knew when she last woke up, when she next needed a nap, and it has a feature called the sweet spot feature. I think this is on the like premium version, but it's the best money I've ever spent. I would highly recommend it if you've got the cash to do it. I think the monthly subscription is not too much, and like I say, it's the sweet spot feature which comes up on your front screen, and it tells you when they next need a nap. And when you have more than one kid and you haven't just got one person to completely focus on and to think about, you know, oh, they woke up at that time, I'll remember that. My brain, after having 2 kids, I kid you not, it's frazzled. Like I don't remember what I had for breakfast. I don't have the mental capacity to keep track of it all and do it all. I wish I could, but this is just so much more helpful. Having it on my front screen, on my phone, like that's just genius to me. So the Huckleberry app has been an absolute game changer, and you can like completely track like everything that they've done. Like I could literally go back weeks and weeks and weeks and months and months and months. To be honest, I think for me it just lightened the mental load, and it allowed me to plan my day a little bit better because I knew roughly when she was going to have her naps, and I could get in the car and get her to sleep in the car seat or something like that. It just helped me a lot in those newborn days, and anything, honestly, anything at your fingertips, like I would use it, especially in those newborn days, because we are surviving out here and these are the tools that we need to survive. The next massively practical tip is to master the distraction techniques for your specific child. I feel like every kid is so different, and what's going to work and entertain one type of child might not entertain and work for another type of child. For example, I have a very active boy. He needs running around like a dog, frankly. Like he is crazy, he's got so much energy, and he is non-stop, he's wired like all the time. So for us, realistically, sitting down and colouring and doing arts and crafts, it's not his thing. He doesn't have the attention span for it. It's not his interest right now. He's actually, now he's at an age where he's like 3.5, he's getting a lot better at that kind of thing, and he does enjoy those kind of things if he's doing it alongside someone, but he wouldn't necessarily sit down and do it on his own. But what he would do is, if I set up an activity outside or a scavenger hunt or something, like literally just like get a load of mini eggs or whatever, I pop them outside in the garden in various places and tell him that there's like a little scavenger hunt that he's got to do, and that would literally give me like 10-15 minutes where I could feed Hallie. I'm thinking more about in the summer, like especially for my child, like getting outside, putting the sprinklers on, letting him run around outside the sprinklers. Hallie was born in July, so that was a massive asset to us, having something like that. Another great thing that he really liked is using like old boxes from like old HelloFresh deliveries or whatever. I'd cut a little hole in it and he'd pretend it's a car, or he'd pretend it's a space rocket or a boat or something. He would actually quite like to draw on those as well, like a 3D box, and he'd like draw all over it. I'd give him proper felt tips and everything because we were in the garden, so it didn't matter. Or I'd keep some bubble wrap from an old delivery and I'd let him like put that on the patio or even inside or whatever, put that all down, and he'd like jump jump up and down on the bubbles, on the bubble wrap, so that he could pop all the bubbles. That kind of thing, like, or bubbles. That's actually saying bubbles. Bubbles are a great one. You get a massive pack of bubbles from Home Bargains or whatever, and give him bubbles and him go around the garden, and he loves that kind of stuff. But really thinking about specific activities to tell him that's what we're doing, and allowing him the freedom and the space to go and do something like that, rather than just asking him to sit and be quiet. Like, that's not toddler behaviour, and it was never going to work. If I'm trying to feed and just asking, like, not have a distraction technique for him, he would be constantly asking me to do something, or worse, jumping on us and like hitting us, and you know, just crying and whining. He obviously needs entertaining just as much. So yeah, distraction techniques and activity setups and that kind of thing tailored for your kid was key. I know a lot of people love those mess-free Crayola like colouring things, and we have used those and we do definitely like them. George does sometimes want me to do it with him, because it's more of a sit-down activity. I think he prefers like adult engagement when he does like sit-down activities, but when he's running around he doesn't care. Like, he absolutely loves that kind of thing. The next really practical tip for transitioning from 1 to 2 kids, for me, it was definitely giving the toddler praise from the baby, from the younger sibling. I'm just going to pop you down again, honey, because you don't want to be up there, do you? So for us, that very much looked like when I would give George praise, it coming from me, it didn't really seem to mean much, but when I gave it from Hallie, it seemed to mean the world to him. So I would say things like, Hallie thinks you're so kind, Hallie thinks you're such a great big brother, Hallie thinks you're so funny, Hallie thinks you're so caring, all of those kind of things. Even when she was just a newborn and she obviously wasn't even looking at him, she was just like a blob, I would say that if he did something nice or kind, I would say, oh, Hallie thinks you're so kind, Hallie said thank you. If he was doing something really silly and funny, like, I would say, oh, Hallie thinks you're so funny. Like, it would just always be praise coming from her. And I even use this technique now. She's 8 months old now, so George is really keen on like getting her to laugh and like making her smile and stuff. And anytime he does something funny, I'm like, oh look, Hallie thinks you're so funny, Hallie thinks you're such a great big brother, making her smile, making her laugh. And it's like one of his like life's goals is to make her laugh and smile. That's just a really nice thing that's come from that I did in the early days. I also love this technique when it comes to trying to get him out of the house. So instead of giving him praise from Hallie, to try and get him to do something that he wouldn't necessarily always want to do, I would say, Hallie really needs you to show her how to do something. So getting your toddler to show the baby how to do a task. Not only does that get him involved in stuff, but it also is a really great way of getting them to do things, like I say, that they don't necessarily want to do, like getting out of the house, putting shoes on, putting coats on, brushing teeth, eating dinner, having a bath, washing hair. All of the things, all of the little mundane tasks that you have to do every single day, but always just seem like such a massive battle. This is such a foolproof technique, at least it is in my house. I hope that it works for you if it's something that you struggle with as well. But yeah, George is like always, he never wants to put his shoes on, he's always running around, he just hates the idea of putting his shoes on. Even though if we go in somewhere really amazing like soft play, he still doesn't like actively want to put his shoes on. But then if I say, oh, can you come in and show Hallie how to put her shoes on, because she doesn't know how to do it yet, he's there instantly, and he's like, right, here you go, Hallie, like, you put one on like this, put one on like this, and he does it straight away. And I'm like, amazing. It even works with brushing teeth, which, wow, like, once I found that out, guys, that has changed my life of an evening, to get George to brush his teeth. After the bath, when he's tired, I lay them both down together, and Hallie's there, and I'm like, Hallie, you've got to watch George, and he's going to brush his teeth, and I'm going to brush yours, but you've got to watch George and see how he's doing it. And if she's never not looking at him, he's always like, Hallie's not looking. I'm like, oh, Hallie, you've got to look at George, because he's teaching you how to do it. And I'm like, George is brushing his front teeth really well, he's brushing his back teeth really well. Hallie, keep watching. That's what I always say every single night, and it just works like a charm. So yeah, absolutely think that one is just revolutionary. Another practical tip for transitioning from 1 to 2, and one that I had to work very, very hard on in myself, because I found it very difficult to not do this, is to avoid blaming the baby for things. And like, for me, it was really difficult, because it's like, obviously it's the baby, the reason that I can't play with you is because I'm doing something with the baby. But I had to reframe that. I couldn't keep saying that to George, because everything that was coming out of my mouth was, I can't play with you because of the baby. Wait a minute, I'm busy. Wait a minute, I'm doing this. I'm sterilising bottles, or I'm feeding the baby, or if I'm changing a baby's nappy, or if I'm doing something. Like, it was constantly me saying that I couldn't do something because of the baby, or saying that George couldn't do something because of the baby. So I would be like, oh, Hallie's sleeping, you can't shout, you can't go upstairs, or you can't go in Hallie's room because she's sleeping, or like whatever it might have been. There was just constant things of, you can't do this because it's because of Hallie. To be honest, my whole goal was to just not have Hallie be the source of George's frustration, because toddlers are frustrated a lot of the time, and I knew that him waiting would be a source of frustration, but I didn't want Hallie to be the source of that. So instead of saying something like, I can't play with you right now because I'm feeding the baby, or because I'm feeding Hallie, I would try and say, I'd love to play with you in a moment, but why don't we play a puzzle while we wait? Or why don't we sing Hallie a song while we wait? Or why don't we play I Spy? That was a really great one. We used to play I Spy, even though George doesn't know the alphabet. Instead of saying like, I spy my little eye, something beginning with blah, I would just say, I spy a bird, what can you see? And he'd say, I spy a tree. Like, and we'd just do it like that. That was just like the toddler friendly version of I Spy. And we would do something like that, something that didn't require me moving or picking him up or anything like that. It was very much, I could sit there, I could feed Hallie, but I could still interact with George, and it would be beneficial to like both of us. That was a massive learning curve for me. Like, it was very difficult to think of a very, you know, diplomatic way of putting something that's going to take a toddler's crazy emotions into account, but it really worked. Like, when I had the patience and the mental capacity to do it, that kind of approach really did work for him. Failing that, the use of sand timers was great, because it's a visual way of telling them how long something's going to take. This is, for example, a 5-minute sand timer that George got for Christmas. I got it on Amazon. I'll link it down below. Purple is his favourite colour as well. So fantastic. George responds really well to these, and I would just say that after this sand timer's finished, that's when the telly's going off, or when the sand timer's finished, that's when mummy can play with you, or when the sand timer's finished is when I have to stop playing, I have to go and cook dinner, but we've got until the whole sand timer's finished to play together, or something like that. Failing actually getting a physical sand timer, there's loads of sand timer apps on your phone, which again, brilliant, works really well for like sharing as well. If you're at a play date and 2 kids are like fighting over one toy, sand timer, 2 minutes, it's your toy. After the sand timer goes down, it's the other person's toy. Like, works a treat. Toddlers love sand timers. George specifically loves this one, the 5-minute one. We use this all the time. So yeah, if the words and talking and the deflection doesn't work, sand timers, baby, sand timers. I did write all of these down, and I've jumped between a few of them. The other one that I wanted to get in here was Screentime. Screentime is okay. Like I was talking about, that's the one underneath, all of the activities and the distraction techniques that I was like talking about, but also the use of Screentime was key in those early months. And we actually use the iPad a little bit as well. We don't often use the iPad, we use it as a very last resort, or if we're traveling like for a long distance. I don't use the iPad frequently with George, just because he doesn't respond very well to it. Other kids aren't that affected by it, the behaviour's not that affected by it, but George's behaviour goes, oh my gosh, so south so quickly when he's on the iPad specifically. Not as much with the TV, but the iPad, where he has like full access to like YouTube Kids or whatever, and is constantly changing all the different videos. I think his brain just it's just on overdrive, and it doesn't match well with him. But in the early days of having 2, we definitely did use the iPad. He did stop being allowed on YouTube Kids because of that very reason, but we did have a few games on there, like some educational games and stuff, like colouring games and some letters games and things like that. We downloaded a few things on there, and they're still on there, and we'll use them in a last resort, like I say. But in those early days, there were times where I was feeding Hallie for like an hour and a half at a time, and I could not expect George to be entertained with a cardboard box for that long. So cardboard box, then iPad. That was how it worked. Or maybe a few episodes of Bluey or Mickey Mouse or whatever he was the phase he was going through at the time, Paw Patrol, whatever. So yeah, Screentime, in my opinion, use it if you need it. And then last but not least was using similar language with your toddler and your baby. So for example, if I was talking to George about how maybe I can't play with him right now because I'm feeding Hallie or whatever it might have been, when I was doing something with George, I would say to Hallie, even though she's obviously oblivious to it, I would say to her, one moment, Hallie, I'm just doing something with George, or I'll be with you in just a moment, Hallie, I'm just helping George go to the toilet, or I'm just helping him, whatever it would have been. I'm just playing with these magnetars. If she was crying a little bit, for example, and I was like in the middle of, you know, helping George go to the toilet, obviously we were potty training and it's all just the fun of being a toddler parent. I would say, one moment, Hallie, I'm just helping George, so that he knew that obviously she has to wait if I'm helping him and he has to wait if I'm helping her. Like it goes both ways. Obviously she didn't know what was going on, but I felt like vocalizing that was important for him to hear anyway. That was the idea of it. So yeah, those are my top practical tips for transitioning from being a mum of one to a mum of two. I would absolutely love to hear any of your guys' practical advice, proper advice for like if in a certain situation and what you've done and what's worked, what hasn't worked. If your kids are like totally different to mine and responded really well to a different kind of technique, then I'd love to hear that as well. Like I find it really interesting to hear what's worked for other people, and it's all trial and error. We're all just trying our best. And we're all just trying to ride the wave, right? And anything that we can do to help each other would, you know, that's the main aim of this channel, that's the main aim of videos like this. So I'd love to hear any of your guys' experience in the comments, and chat to each other, help each other, support each other. Like that's what this is about. And I know that not everyone has that outlook, but I know that the majority of us do, and that is definitely why I'm still here and why I carry on doing these videos, because honestly you guys are my mum village, and I don't know what I'd do without you. But yeah, for now I'm going to love you and leave you, and I'll chat to you guys in the comments. Bye guys.
'Cause you glue all the pieces back together. Yeah, you take all my wrongs and make them better. Yeah, you're making me wanna try forever. And I feel so free, oh my sweet baby.